Let me tell you about a black tie wedding event in the Hamptons. Yep, the Hamptons, Long Island. My husband and I were invited to. Now, this was a few years back. Admittedly, the wedding was in November, kind of cold, but it also meant you could avoid the large, crazy crowds.
Phew, I think that's the worst of them.
And the prices, well, decent enough. It also meant that you didn't need to get a second mortgage in order to afford a few days in a place here. So let's talk about the invitation, because it deserved some recognition and it will set the precedent. Yo, this card was thick. It almost felt like a thick bit of block. I swear, does anybody even know this exists? It was embossed, ornate, heavy, the most luxurious invitation I had ever seen in my life, and probably will ever see. Could also second as a weapon too. Now, for their wedding, they hired an actual wedding planner. Set a budget, admittedly a high budget, because these two had high-level jobs in investment banking in New York. By the way, this was before the 2008 crash, so a while back, but the best time for banking. So when I say these people had money, they had money. However, this is a prime example of how you can have money, but you can't buy class. She doesn't offer herself to everyone. She comes to you. Their execution was just meh. So they had noted down some recommended accommodations starting at $600. Yeah, you heard me right. $600, and yep, starting at. So we are signing up for a wedding invite or an investment? Now let's start with the positives, because we're positive people. The accommodation was near the church. That's the only positive. Downside, it was a 45-minute drive from where the reception was. I guess you could say this was an upside again. There were shuttle buses included. Now, we looked at the accommodation and thought, nah, not for us. So we opted for a fancy motel right next to the reception location at a fraction of the cost. The reception was meant to start 2 hours after the ceremony, which allowed time for transport, to get photos and get to the venue. So let's fast forward 2 hours later, and people were hanging outside in November weather, just waiting for the shuttle buses to arrive. And periodically, the shuttle bus would arrive and drive off again. Why? Because there were people in them, and it was like a merry-go-round. So the next lot of people that would sit in, they were just going round and round in circles, just to kill time. The reception was in a converted barn, which I admit was lovely, but practical, nah. There wasn't enough room for the cocktail reception and dinner to be held indoors. So the solution was hold the cocktail reception outside under a tent in November. Now, the worst part was there was no flooring, just grass. I don't know how many queens have walked on grass in heels. It's a pain in the butt and not cute. Let me set the scene. Imagine you're sipping your drink, you see this cute guy in front of you. He looks at you, you look at him, and you think, I'm going to pull out all the stops. Let me get it all sexy and walk. But your heels are sinking and you're having to drag your heels out of the grass because it's muddy. And you're almost slipping as well. So the guy looks at you and says something to his friends. They all look and give you a kind of, ugh, look and look away.
Ew, that's disgusting.
You'd be standing there thinking, I'm such a fool. I was sexy 10 seconds ago, and now I'm one of those cheesy circus magicians. So understandably, all women just sat down because ain't nobody getting their best attire out to get it dirty. And of course we wear heels to look tall, not to sink and look shorter. Now let's get to seating. Surely that can't be an issue, right? Wrong. Now we get moved inside for dinner, but the lighting was almost entirely just candles. Whilst it felt romantic, it almost felt a bit moody and creepy. And in a practical sense, you realise you can't read a single thing. The place cards were written in the most ornate script imaginable too. Whilst gorgeous, bloody impractical. There was no seating chart either, where you can say, okay, I don't need to know through cards, I can just walk up to my seat. So guests wandered around, squinting, holding the cards inches from their face, like we were decoding some ancient scrolls. Well, we may as well have been. We were finally served our much-awaited first course. The wedding was well delayed, and by now we were starving. It was shrimp bisque, exciting, until you get the plate and you realised it's topped with 2 whole shrimp. And I mean, you're seeing 2 eyes staring back at you and saying, because of you. Now, nothing spells elegance and black tie like cracking a head, periodically peeling the shell by fingers and mouth, and a complete nightmare if you haven't done this before. I thought my husband had a lucky escape because he was a vegetarian at the time. But then his entree arrived. A stuffed pepper with beautiful presentation. You know where you think, I cannot wait to eat this because it looks so good. Well, inside it was undercooked quinoa. No. Not al dente. Literal, uncooked quinoa. The table decor was stunning. Nothing like I'd ever seen before. Tall silver candelabra with black tapers. Gorgeous and almost gothic but chic. Moss at the base. I personally wouldn't have that for obvious reasons, and you'll find out why. So before I continue the story, because believe me, you'll want to hear this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now back to the story. Scattered with towering vases holding silver-painted branches with tea lights hanging from them, the whole setup was about 10 feet high from the table. Truly, it was a sight to see. It was gorgeous to look at, of course. Almost a work of art, but impractical as fuck. And here's why. The heat from the tea lights melted the fishing line. The tea lights and the holders started dropping onto the tables, onto our plate and our dinner.
Emergency.
Then the moss caught fire. And it wasn't once either. At least 2 times there were flaming centerpieces being carried out by staff like ceremonial torches. It was chaos, of course.
Oh my golly spooshka.
Guests were trying to look upbeat, giving a strange smile to the bride and groom, making it look like they saw nothing at all. Now, come into the bridesmaid's speech. And because everything was delayed, she got drunk. Not cute drunk. You know the kind of drunk where you can only open one eye and your lipstick is smudged? That kind of drunk. She decided to share how the couple met, which we thought was cute, apart from those who knew. Turns out, it wasn't a beautiful love story, rather a drunken hookup.
Oh my god!
Also, they hooked up while they were both seriously dating other people. Not exactly the heartwarming love story Grandma was hoping for.
That is absolutely outrageous.
At this point, you could see the bride and groom just kind of gave up and decided to forget the night. Through alcohol, of course. So, in conclusion, they spent thousands of dollars on this wedding, and somehow it wasn't enjoyable. They also divorced a few years later. But hey, it was memorable for sure, just not for the right reasons. A prime example of money can buy a wedding, but not common sense.